ice 20,000 feet high. Alpamayo is its name, but mountaineers call it in the world. Down the west coast of South America stretches a chain of mountains for 5,000 miles, the Andes. They cut through Peru like a jagged, ice-covered knife, and in the Cordillera Blanca, or White Mountains, stands Alpamayo. Along its north ridge, rising through thousands of feet to the very summit of Alpamayo, came hopeful expeditions from Europe and the Americas. They struggled to climb the mountain, using this battlement of snow and ice. They failed, some retreating in the face of near disaster. In 1957, the summit was reached by a German expedition, but by a climb up the opposite side of the mountain. In 1966, 6 British mountaineers, led by Dennis Gray, came to attempt the unconquered North Ridge. Dennis, a printer, is 30, a veteran of 2 expeditions to the Himalayas. Terry Burnell, an engineer, is 23. A Yorkshireman like Dennis, Terry also climbed with him on Rio Santa, a 24,000-foot peak in the Himalayas. David Brathgate, aged 24. He's a carpenter and joiner from Edinburgh. Dave's an outstanding climber of steep snow and ice. John Ammett, aged 21, a student teacher from Cheshire. John made the first climb up the 5,000-foot Troll Tint Wall in Norway. Roy Smith is a professional soldier. Aged 25, Roy is incredibly strong and one of Britain's outstanding rock climbers. The last climber is never seen. He was cameraman Ned Kelly. This is his record of the expedition to Alpamayo, the magnificent mountain.
The Rio Santa, a river formed from the melting snows of the high mountains we'd come to climb. Our taxi brought us, ears popping and car sick, from Lima, capital of Peru at sea level, over mountain passes 14,000 feet high. Our equipment has gone ahead with Terry and Dennis, riding 200 miles on top of a lorry. Some trip. Narrow, unfenced roads. I wonder if driving in Peru isn't more dangerous than climbing its mountains. There were signs I was right. Crosses are more frequent than milestones on the Rio Santa road. Dr. Marino Juani crashed here. They don't say how it happened. Sometimes the list of names on the crosses is longer. A lorry or bus lies on the riverbed. The sight of Indians in ponchos, mules, and the narrow cobbled street makes us forget our travel sickness. The outskirts of Huaraz, at last, the real Peru. Huaraz main square. You don't expect to see palm trees growing at 10,000 feet. But this town, with a population of 25,000, has a marvelous climate. On Sunday, schoolgirls circle the square, while radios in surrounding cafes blast out the Peruvian hit parade. The Indian peasant walks miles to sell a few potatoes in the market. If you're grand enough to own shoes, eager boys beg to clean them. You work 6 days in the fields and earn 4 shillings a day. It must be hard to raise a smile. What do policemen do where no one has the energy to cause trouble? Discuss the World Cup football matches relayed from England and think of miniskirted London. Outside the church, the Indians sit patiently, selling maize and tiny purple potatoes. 2 oranges cost a sole or 3pence. They grow just outside the town, so does all kinds of fruit and vegetables. Huaraz sounds like paradise, but to live in the shadow of mountains is to have death for a neighbor. Above Huaraz, this cross faces a mountain called Ranrapalca. One morning in 1941, a natural dam at its foot gave way, and millions of gallons of water roared down the valley into Huaraz. Boulders the size of houses smashed through the town, followed by sludge 60 feet deep, stifling all movement. Within 10 minutes, 6,000 people were dead. A massive boulder serves a memorial to those beneath. A bridge crossed the river here, but now the bridge is buried and the river has changed its course. They opened a new hotel the day before the disaster. Luckily, there weren't any tourists in town. The hotel vanished in the flood. 25 years later, it's possible to turn the disaster to your advantage by selling the stone to builders. Eventually, the boulders will vanish, but not the memory of December the 13th, 1941. The expedition is ready to move on to the mountains. 3 tons of food, ropes, clothing and tents to be loaded. All it requires is brute force and lots of conflicting advice. Climbers can give plenty of both. We were lucky to have help with the loading. Some American Benedictine monks had stored our gear in the grounds of their monastery, an old hotel on the outskirts of Huaraz. The monks, being used to hard work, kept us moving until the last load was on. Our driver, using a strange variety of knots to tie down the load, faces a critical audience. After all, we're travelling 80 miles on top of the lorry, and I don't fancy being thrown off. Passing Indians stop to ask if we're a travelling circus, but hearing we're just a bunch of lunatic mountaineers, move hurriedly on. 11 o'clock, and 80 miles of dusty, potholed road ahead. Speed is essential, but nobody tells the driver. We remember the crosses by the road. Once again, we follow the Santa River. 80 miles down from Huaraz, we'll reach the Colchas Bridge. Over that bridge, we'll load our equipment onto mules for the march to our mountain, Alpamayo. Miguel gave us a few heart-stopping moments demonstrating his racing driver potential, but that is soon forgotten. Through the stone-cracked windscreen looms the hazy shape of Peru's highest mountain, Nevada Huascaran. Over 22,000 feet high, it dominates the Santa Valley in size and tragedy. In 1962 it avalanched, and 4,000 people working in the valley beneath were killed. Peruvians love parties. Chicha, a home-brewed beer, had been flowing for some time before we stopped to have a look at this fiesta. Chicha is a pretty strong beer, obviously. If you've drunk too much, the women either tell you off or wait for you to fall over. Drink is served from the bucket. The beer, chicha, is made from maize which the ladies chew, then spit into a bowl. Add water and sugar and leave to ferment for a few days. Delicious, so they say. Occasionally they add things to make the chicha brew faster. One village added sulfuric acid. Well, they had a great party, but the chicha killed 3 people. The chicha is finished, so the fiesta's over. While they go and sleep off their hangovers, we get our lorry down the road to Colchas Bridge. Here at Colchas, across the wide, fast-flowing Rio Santa, there's supposed to be a bridge, but it's gone. Only a cable spans the river, with a small platform for hauling goods across. Everything will have to be unloaded this side, then hauled over the river. Roy is the first passenger. He's going to try and find Hacienda Colchas, the farm where we should be staying. We need mules to carry our equipment to the hacienda and more men. Next day, one of the American monks, Andy, turns up to help. Every packing case has to be smashed open and the boxes carried down for loading. "15 minutes to send a load across and get the empty platform back. Then start again." The hauling line is made of strips of goat skin. If that breaks, I suppose you spend the night dangling 50 feet above the river. And it's not the sort of river to fall into. The bridge was washed away years ago in a big flood. Pity they forgot to tell you. At least I think that's what our new helper tried to tell us. He's Indio Joe, a Quechua Indian. Not as elegantly dressed as Dave Bathgate or as clean, but always ready to laugh. He soon became one of the boys. After 2 days' work, our equipment is starting to pile up. The boxes holding our tinned and dried food make the biggest pile. At least we won't starve. Mules begin to arrive from the hacienda and loading starts. Later we became used to this slow motion affair, but at first it drove us mad. Either the boxes fell off, the mules fell down, or the knots came undone. But the loads keep coming. By the river, swirling dust has made life miserable. I've been eaten alive by midges and not seen a mountain for days. I'm fed up. We're on our way. Only a couple of miles up to the hacienda, and there we can hire the 25 mules we need for the march to Alpamayo. To drive across the Rio Santa used to take 1 minute. It's taken us 3 days. Hacienda Colchas. Once this was one of the richest farms in Peru. Now it is slowly decaying. When the bridge was destroyed, it became impossible to sell the crops. No money could be found for a new bridge, so the crops were left to rot in the fields. Years ago, the president of Peru strolled this courtyard. Now it's graced by rusting tractors. Even the owner has left. Sometimes he writes the caretaker to see if the farm is still standing. Dave and John soon make themselves at home. Days of grime to be washed away, and then the fleas are carefully beaten into unconsciousness. Rosita couldn't believe it was really happening, so she brought her best dolly to say hello to the funny gringos. No all-night launderettes in this part of the world. But the hard work is going on at this end of the courtyard. The caretaker's wife, Senora Marina, says she can get us mules. We need 25, which will have to come from the surrounding farms. Luckily, the American monks, Andy and Joel, have stayed to help, as our Spanish is hopeless. Patience must be Andy's middle name. No one seems to have mentioned the word mules, or burros as they call them in Peru, for hours. Perhaps they're still discussing the weather. Brother Joel is also used to Peruvian bargaining. This may go on for days, delighting everyone but us. We offered 20 soles a day for the mules. Marina said 40. We finally paid 25. We offered the muleteers 30 soles a day. She demanded 50. We paid 40. Everyone was happy. Hearing your own voice for the first time is a strange experience, especially if you don't know what a tape recorder or a microphone is.
Mañana, mañana dice, tu mamá tiene la culpa. Mañana, mañana dice, pasado, pasado dice, ¿cómo sabe engañar, pobre corazón? Yeah.
Indio Joe speaks hardly any Spanish. He talks Quechua, the language spoken when the Incas ruled Peru, and almost the only language spoken by Indians of the highlands. Living in such a remote spot makes it impossible to go to school. Millions of Peruvians have never been educated. Many of the Indians are unable to read, write, or even speak Spanish, Peru's official language. As Peru's economy improves, more money is being spent on education, and one day, even here, there'll be a school. Then the Indians will stand a chance of improving their miserable existence. After centuries of oppression, they desperately need this chance. Next morning at 7, I stagger into the courtyard to find a group of Indians sat silently huddled into their ponchos. Our arrieros, the men with the mules. They've left their plots of land to march with us into the mountains for 10 shillings a day, or double what they would earn at home. A suggestion that they might start loading doesn't arouse much interest. It's nice sitting here. Anyway, a few mules have been loaded. What more do we want? We explain that we must get away, and if we don't leave in 2 hours, they won't get paid. This seems to work. Some mules work harder than others. Since the arrieros don't weigh the loads, one mule can find itself carrying 3 times as much as another, if it stands still long enough. Eventually, order is restored. The mules accept the inevitable, and the march to the mountains becomes a reality. Could they be sorry to see us go? At least the presence of 6 tea-swilling, porridge-eating gringos has made a change. And you don't get many of those at Hacienda Colchas. Alpamayo stands hidden 20 miles away. A direct approach is impossible. As centuries ago, its glaciers gouged enormous ravines along the sides of which no path can be made. So our route bypasses these difficulties. It's much longer, but easier, provided you are used to driving reluctant mules up steep paths, and you haven't got a sore throat and a headache like Dennis. We climb 8,000 feet the first day. The once seemingly clumsy mule begins to move like a Derby winner. They carry huge loads whilst I stagger under the weight of a camera, water bottle and 2 oranges. If I feel tired now, how on earth will I ever get up a big mountain? Unlike us, neither the mules nor their owners are interested in looking at mountains, which is probably just as well, as we'd never get anywhere. As we get higher, soroche or altitude sickness hits us. It's like having a terrible hangover, though there's nothing stronger to drink than aspirin and water on this expedition. Not even brandy for medicinal purposes. A sad mistake. The soroche leaves us indifferent, even when another mule starts a sit-down strike. For the arriero, it means starting all over again. And this happens a dozen times a day. A nightmare for a time and motion expert. Only one more pass to cross, close to the peak of Nevada, Santa Cruz. If this 20,000-foot mountain was transparent, we might see Alpamayo beyond. But mountains aren't made that way. We must curb our impatience. "16,000 feet, the high spot of our march. I feel bitter that we have to descend thousands of hard-won feet to get into the Alpamayo Valley. So far, though, we've been lucky. We've only had one mule go astray, but other expeditions have had mules killed on these tracks. We've all reached the valley bottom safely, but if a mule had slipped higher up, we could never have saved it. Perhaps it's the rapid disappearance of the sun, or the smell of our campfire in the distance that urges the mules on. Perhaps they sense it's tea time, a splendid British custom which the Indians seem to like. Our third night on the march, and still no sight of Alpamayo, though we do have Terry's stew as a consolation prize. Each morning, the business of packing up and cooking breakfast takes hours. The water for our tea has frozen overnight. During the day, the Andean sun is fierce and hot, but as daylight fades, the temperature drops like a stone, leaving 12 hours of bitter cold to be endured. Little wonder that in the Middle Ages, when the Inca ruled Peru, the highland Indios worshipped the sun. Life is hard for the Indio, a diet consisting mainly of potatoes, maize, and a little dried meat. For his hunger, fatigue, and the climate, the Indio has one remedy, his supply of Andean gold, the coca leaf. One of the world's most dangerous drugs comes from this leaf, cocaine. The leaf is chewed with powdered limestone carried in a small bottle. Cocaine is released, numbing the mouth and then the nervous system. The Indio forgets the cold, his hunger, and the hard work until the effects of the drug wear off. Then he starts again, until the cocaine can no longer drive the exhausted body on. Life in the Peruvian highlands is hard and short. With luck, this should be our last day on the march. No doubt our Indio friends will be glad to get away from these desolate spots. Particularly the dog, as we haven't seen a tree for days. And then, round the corner, it's there, Alpamayo, our mountain. Still miles away, a fabulous cone of snow and ice scraping the sky at over 20,000 feet. I wonder if I'll ever stand on the top and look down at this valley. I wonder if any of us will reach the top of Alpamayo. 4 in the afternoon. We found a campsite, so Dennis pays off the arrieros. It's cold already, and we want to get the Indios and their mules down lower before darkness falls. They'll be home in 2 days, no doubt celebrating their return with buckets of chicha and bottles of pisco, a powerful spirit.
Nuevo burros.
Cuatro, señora Marina. 4 burros. 5.
A lack of any common language provides lots of laughs all round. I only hope everyone gets paid the right money.
200.
Chino. 4 burros, señora.
10. See?
Dennis tries to explain that we shall want them to come back in 5 weeks' time for our return journey, a message we don't want confused.
Senora. Quattro
Sí,
burros.
doña Marina.
Now?
It's
Paid?
really
No?
cold now.
No.
Everyone has been paid, but they don't seem anxious to leave.
Say. You go down to hut. Now? Donkeys? Shh. Hut. Fia, see?
Quattro borsi para...
Round donkeys up. Say.
Dos, cuatro, ocho burros todavía.
Eventually, they take our advice and start down the mountain. Without loads, the mules need no urging on, only too glad to get away from this inhospitable place. To the Indios, we are harmless, wealthy lunatics, and they gladly leave us to make peace with our magnificent mountain.
Mañana me voy, pasado mañana por donde estaré. Yo te vengo, China, barbillata. Hoy yo estoy aquí, mañana.
After days of being on the move, it's nice to have somewhere to call home, even if it does consist of just a couple of tents. Dominating our base camp is the huge peak of Nevada, Santa Cruz. Closer, and to the right of our tents, runs a ridge that hides Alpamayo, our objective, from us. It may take weeks to find a route to the mountain and to climb it, so we intend to make base camp as comfortable as we can. Dave and John build a kitchen, for once we get on the mountain we shall be cooking in the tents, amongst a tangle of bodies and cast-off clothing, so we spread ourselves whilst we have the chance. With Terry is Twinkletoes, the Indian who is to guard our equipment. Against whom or what, I'm not quite sure, though. Since any kind of utensil or container is prized by the Indios, they must be looking forward to the end of the expedition when we shall give things away. Not the ice axes, though, or very much rope, as this will be fixed to the mountain to safeguard our descent. Appetites are still good here at 16,000 feet, though Dennis assures us that as we get higher, food will take a very secondary place to our need for fluids. At higher altitudes, we should each drink 7 pints of fluid a day if we are to keep fit enough to climb. John, the youngest in the team, knows that the younger you are, the longer it usually takes to acclimatise. But since only a few years separate us all, we shall suffer together. Loads are being prepared for the first carry up the mountain. Another camp has to be established closer to Alpamayo, and this must be well stocked, so that if the weather should break, the climbers can sit a storm out for several days without returning all the way down to base camp. We have no Sherpas or porters to help carry loads on this mountain. The climbing equipment, food and tents will go on our own backs. Each pack frame carries 50 pounds, or is it tons? So the labour begins. As we struggle upwards, the mountains begin to reveal themselves, most of them unmapped, unnamed, and even unclimbed, apart from the great bulk of Nevada Santa Cruz. Somewhere at its foot is our base camp. To reach the ridge that keeps us from Alpamayo, we have to climb this gully full of shattered stone. Each step is uncertain on this great pile of broken rock. You put your foot on a solid-looking stone and it starts to slide back down the mountain. Everyone hates this section of the ascent. Some will make this trip 10 times carrying heavy loads, and always this constant fight to keep your balance on the shifting stone. Even a twisted ankle at this stage could mean a serious delay to the advance of the expedition. Since bad weather could break at any time, it's important to get on with the task of establishing higher camps. Near the top of the gully, we set foot on snow for the first time. Only a small patch, but since Alpamayo is supposed to be a snow mountain, it's reassuring to find some about. A small cliff of loose rock bars the way out of the gully onto the ridge. It's not difficult climbing, but we're still not acclimatized. The loads seem heavier every minute. John makes his way over the loose, shattered rock, knowing that one clumsy move could send a couple of tons of it down onto Dennis, waiting below. Since we're not roped together at this stage, we've fixed cord down the steeper bits of cliff as a safeguard should anyone slip. The cord is tied to a piton, driven into the rock as far as it will go, since it will be taking some pretty rough treatment. After 4 hours of steady slogging, we're feeling pretty shattered and looking forward to reaching some level ground. Emerging from the gully, we reached the crest of the ridge. A relief to see Alpamayo again, this time at close quarters. Months ago, we talked about this mountain over mugs of tea in a little cafe in Yorkshire. Still several miles away, the north or left-hand ridge soars to the summit of Alpamayo, a frozen wave of snow nearly 4,000 feet above us. Near this hump of ice, we hope to put our last camp. Then we shall launch ourselves on the most exacting part of the climb. From this north ridge, 3 Swiss climbers, roped together, fell 600 feet. By some miracle, they escaped with cuts, bruises, and shock. 3 years later, a French team reached the top of the North Ridge, but in darkness and storm mistook it for the summit, which was still hundreds of feet further on. They turned back, not realizing their mistake until it was too late. And so the ridge stands impassively awaiting its next bunch of contenders. Camp 2. A splash of colour amidst the unrelieved greyness of the moraine and the harsh white glare of the glacier. Over pints of tea, tomorrow's journey up the glacier is discussed. Dennis, as leader, decides how much food and equipment needs moving and who's to carry it. As climbers are notorious for their individualistic approach to problems, it's not easy to keep 6 of them happy. Amongst the piles of equipment we brought from Britain was a box of books. James Bond and Shakespeare help us to pass the long Peruvian nights. Someone said the 2 worst things about an expedition was the boredom and the bed sores. Maybe they had a point. 2 hours from now, Terry will be wearing every stitch of clothing he possesses against the cold. And Dave will finish his day in the depths of his sleeping bag, while a layer of frost forms on the inside of the tent. But tomorrow morning will be even colder on the glacier. A new world surrounds us. From now on, we shall move over snow and ice, reflecting the heat and glare of the sun. To remove our dark glasses for more than a couple of minutes is asking for an attack of eye-searing snow blindness. A couple of minutes forgetfulness can mean lying blinded and immobilized in your tent for several days. Our crampons bite into the still crisp snow. Later in the day, when the powerful sun has been to work on the slopes, we may be sinking thigh-deep in the soft, clinging slush, breaking a deep furrow through these white, infertile fields like some kind of human snowplow. It takes time to adjust to the scale of things. We begin to feel like flies picking their way over huge iced cake. The sun gets hotter. The weight of the loads we carry seems to increase. Putting one foot in front of the other begins to call for a conscious effort. Everyone has their own method for forcing themselves up these slopes. Singing a song to yourself can help, but usually I find a phrase sticking in my mind, and after several hours it nearly drives me mad. Better to try and let the mind go blank, ignoring the bass drum beat in your ears as your heart and lungs work overtime. As the snow softens under the sun, the glacier becomes increasingly dangerous. Around us are crevasses, many open and easy to avoid, but there may be others concealed and awaiting the unwary. Above us stand huge seracs, unstable towers of ice weighing hundreds of tons. We try to avoid passing beneath them, but sometimes there is no alternative. Roy starts to cross this section we've called the catwalk. Unlike a cat, Roy doesn't have 9 lives should this bunch of massive icicles collapse on top of him. The steeper sections of a glacier are called ice falls. Dangerous, unpredictable places for the climber to move in. The extremes of temperature keep thousands of tons of ice melting, freezing, and remelting again, constantly poised, ready to crash their way to the foot of the glacier. Each morning we leave our tents and move onto the glacier while it is still dark. This way we hope to pass through the most dangerous spots in the icefall before the sun softens and weakens the icy structures. Named this the sugar bowl. Tottery blocks of ice piled up inside a huge crevasse, just like cubes of sugar in a glass bowl. Three hours continuous climbing has brought us from our camp by the glacier up to the sugar bowl. Once out of this place, we shall dump our loads, returning tomorrow in the early morning to ferry the equipment even higher and establish our last camp. There's going to be a lot of traffic over these crevasses during the next couple of weeks. I hope that both they and us can stand up to the strain. Each day, the ferry service sets out through the icefall. By now, we know the route well. We know when we must hurry to get clear of danger and where we can dawdle a little to admire the scenery. No stops are made for food during the day. Maybe we'll chew a few sweets or a piece of chocolate, but in this heat all we need is liquid, and surrounding us, water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Our last carry up the mountain. Today we join the others at our highest camp. No more scurrying through the icefall or tiptoeing around crevasses. We gather from the others who've gone ahead that the North Ridge is steep rock and ice. The change will be welcome. Even with a chill wind blowing, a mixture of sweat and sun cream trickles from my forehead. Eyes sting and sunglasses steam up. The steepening slope forces us to rope up. A slip in this situation could be nasty, especially carrying a heavy rucksack. Way beneath Dennis wait the open jaws of crevasses on the glacier. Not that an emaciated climber would provide a very satisfactory meal, even if he were prepared to offer himself as a sacrifice. 4 or 5 steps, then rest. Waiting for your own turn to move, it seems a painfully slow pace. You're wrong, of course. You can't go any faster. The rope starts to run a little quicker as John reaches easier ground. Back on these gentler slopes, we can unrope, allowing each of us to move at his own pace. There's nothing worse if you're feeling tired or sick than being roped to 2 other people who seem to be moving like express trains. If you try to snatch a rest, the rope threatens to tug you off your feet. Nothing to do but stumble on after the others, nursing black thoughts. Suddenly there's a shout, and we round a corner to find Terry's cheering grin and the news that tea is nearly ready. Tomorrow we try for the summit. Life seems pretty good again. July the 9th, 7 a.m. We prepare for the attempt to climb the North Ridge of Alpamayo. A chill wind blows across the campsite, a small plateau at 18,000 feet. 6 of us plus equipment crowded into the 2 tents last night. We slept fitfully, the blustery wind flapping the tent walls madly a few inches from our faces. Terry has already suffered from sunburn, so both he and Dennis plaster the Glacier cream on. Terry and Dennis are to share the lead at the start of the ridge. We others will follow shortly, ready to take over the hard work of route finding higher up. In our rucksacks, just a little food, climbing equipment and extra clothing. Speed is essential to reach the summit and return before darkness and cold descend. Above our camp, the North Ridge soars 2,000 feet. Snow and rock at first, changing to ice as it steepens. Great cornices formed from wind-driven snow overhang the right-hand face. To step on one could prove fatal, as they collapse without warning. It happened to the 3 Swiss climbers in 1948. They fell and escaped with their lives, but you can't expect a miracle like that every time. Between the rock buttresses on the ridge are small bands of ice. Using a rope fixed here by Dave and Roy the day before, Terry cuts his way across this awkward patch. Cutting steps in ice is hard, tiring work, rather like chopping up logs one-handed while standing on a ladder. Our ice axes are special metal ones which Dave brought down from Scotland. I'm told they're made in someone's garage to a secret formula. Trust the canny Scots. The rock is pleasantly warm to the touch and is a welcome change from the numbing effects of ice. Dennis is anxious to see what lies ahead, but belayed on this corner he can't tell what's happening, except from the speed at which the rope pays out to Terry in front. And Terry, nicknamed the Gnome, moves rapidly. Away to the east is the Puckaherka group of mountains. Already there is talk of coming back one day to climb there, but first we must deal with the job in hand. Both Terry and Dennis are members of a unique British climbing club, the Rock and Ice. Not only do you have to be an outstanding climber, possess a great sense of humour, but, seemingly most important, be able to drink vast quantities of hot, strong tea. I gather most applicants fail on the tea drinking requirements. Last night it was estimated that it would take us about 6 hours to climb the ridge. Judging by our tents beneath, we have already gained a lot of height, but can we keep this speed up? Throughout the expedition, great pains have been taken to fix rope on all the difficult sections of the climb. Not only does this speed up the process of climbing over the same ground every day, but, even more important, it makes the descent much safer. After climbing a difficult peak, people are often tired and tempted to relax on the way down. This has been the cause of many mountaineering disasters, and one we are determined to guard against. Using special clamps that can be slid easily up the fixed ropes, but lock under a downward pull, we have an additional safeguard to the climbing rope that joins us together. Above us, the North Ridge finishes in a great crest of snow, but the summit of the mountain is still hidden from our view. When Dennis spoke to the leader of the German expedition that first climbed Alpamayo from the south, he described the final part of our climb as an icy ridge looking horribly dangerous. Let's hope he was given to exaggeration. Terry's cap, once a dazzling white, is beginning to show signs of wear. On the march, you could spot him from miles away, but since that cap has been used for mopping up spilt soup, it's begun to blend in with the surroundings. John, Roy and Dave, who left the tents after us, take over the lead for a while. Over on Tayapampa, the next mountain to ours, there's an American expedition trying a first ascent. Wonder how they're doing. Maybe they can see us and are thinking the very same thing. Beneath Roy, our tents, now 2 specks of orange on the snow, mark our progress. If we are successful, we can return to them tonight and eat all the remaining food. Our high-altitude rations have been great, but we have been careful not to eat too much in case of emergencies. This evening, we can make pigs of ourselves. Rope length after rope length, the ridge unfolds. Old territory to Dave, Roy and Terry, who have spent days up here preparing the route. But for the newcomers, John, Dennis and myself, each pitch is fresh and exciting. Gradually the pace slows. Rests become more frequent and necessary. As the rock face and the icy ridge part company, we find ourselves committed to the steep ice slopes. Having melted and refrozen countless times, the ice up here has a texture like cold, smooth marble and is almost as difficult to cut hand and footholds in. Occasionally, a shout from Terry, up in the lead, reaches us, but never the news we are waiting for, that he can see the top of the ridge. Remembering the huge cornices overhanging the west face, Terry moves with a caution that walking a plank with the 3,000-foot drop beneath deserves. It is only now, surrounded by things on so vast a scale, that I am beginning to appreciate the full meaning of the word insignificant. Almost at the top of the ridge. Nothing more is said, but that's enough to get me to raise a grin and feel a little less tired. Height, 20,000 feet. Feeling a bit breathless, but otherwise okay. To reach the summit, Dennis and Terry start the 600-foot traverse along this exposed and corniced ridge. Dave's Indian mask lowers the tension as the rest of the party arrive. Way below us, the Alpamayo Valley. It seems a long time ago that we drove the mules along there.
Good girl, guys. Really?
A large gap separates our ridge from the summit. The boys will have to climb down the face to find a way across. We've been on the move for 6 hours, so the enforced wait is welcome, together with the view of Nevada Huascaran and Huandoy. All attention switches to the summit as Terry reappears and starts on the final wall of snow and ice. But a patch of cloud threatens to cut our view altogether. Climbing a tower of crumbling ice standing on foundations of dubious quality calls for faith and ability. Terry's proved he has both. He's made it. Now to bring Dennis up. First, a move round an awkward bulge of ice and then down into the gap. The rope that joins Dennis and Terry is of little real use now. There are no safe belay points up there, so should either of them slip, the strain could bring the summit and climbers crashing down together. Two more moves to go. Cameras sprout everywhere. The last few feet of climbing is made to a frenzy of clicking shutters, and the cloud returns. Through it shine the broad grins of Dennis and Terry, on the summit. 5 of us reached the top of Alpamayo that day. But what makes people travel 6,000 miles to stand on a spire of ice in a remote corner of Peru? There's no simple answer, but I'd go again tomorrow.